Ahoy there! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another episode of the Frigate Pilot's Manifesto, the series that aims to teach you everything you'll need to know about all the different frigates in EVE Echoes. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Crucifier, which is an Amarr Tech IV EWAR frigate. Now, these EWAR frigates I personally feel are criminally underused here in EVE Echoes, so I do want to be covering a bit more of those recently, so don't be surprised at all if you start seeing after this Crucifier video that I do a Griffin one, a Vigil, and a Mulus video as well, just to showcase how awesome these ships can actually be. So, as usual, what we're going to do is have a look at what these ships are. We're going to look at their stats and fittings, talk a little bit about their history, look at how you can actually fit one of these for combat, and then showcase it in action towards the end of the video. So if you do enjoy this video, let me know by hitting like on it, subscribe to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell so that you never miss an upload, and of course let me know in the comment section down below what ships, what topics you want me to cover in future content. Finally, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, we do have a Patreon page and a Redbubble merchandise store, so do check that out for all kinds of crazy designs based on the Catskull Academy and other related topics. Anyway folks, that all said and done then, let's jump right in to talking about the Amarr Crucifier. The Crucifier is the Amarr Empire Tech IV EWAR frigate, so if we head to the Amarr Empire ship tree, climb the frigate branch to Tech IV, here is the Crucifier. Now, I adore the look of this ship. I love that sort of shell look around it, the claws along the side there. They actually close up as well as you go to achieve warp, which is pretty cool, and you get those really badass looking propulsion systems on the back there, with those kind of wings sticking out the sides. I adore the look of this ship, and certainly I'm going to put a little screenshot on screen now of how it used to look in EVE Online before it got the redesign, and I'm sure everyone can admit the new version definitely looks better. As an interesting aside as well, this bit on the top, I think a lot of people think that that is the cockpit, that's where the capsule actually rests. It's not. The capsule actually rests behind the sensor banks here, basically where the Amarr Empire logo is, but just inside on that port side of the sensor arrays there. That's just behind these massive sensor arrays. That is an Amarr Navy Legion FXVR radar sensor cluster and dual Visium Clara nano-electrical microprocessing suites. That's what powers the Crucifier's EWAR systems, and it is one heck of a sensor array. Now, the Crucifier itself was actually originally designed for exploration and scouting 170 years ago, redesigned recently from what was widely regarded as a poorly engineered death trap. And again, if I put that image back on screen, you can see where those pilots were coming from. It just looks terrible. Apparently, according to its backstory and all of that, it's really poor shielding, poorly armoured, and it was just one of those ships that nobody wanted to fly because, well, ultimately it looked like absolute ass, but also it was incredibly easy to destroy. Now, it was redesigned as a highly focused weapons disruption platform from that original exploration and scouting role, specifically to wreak havoc with Matari-designed turret guidance systems. And this redesign places it firmly into the Slicer class of hulls, along with the Imperial Navy Slicer, which is not currently in EVE Echoes, and that's a ship I hope we get added soon. I am hoping that's one of the Tech 10 new ships that we're hearing about coming soon, and alongside the Executioner line of hulls as well. Those are also Slicer class hulls. So the Executioner 2, the Executioner Interceptor, and the Executioner 2 Interceptor, really cool looking ships. I know those are very popular as well, but I do think the Crucifier is a criminally underused frigate in EVE Echoes, and we're going to talk about why now as we look at its attributes and fittings. So if we start off then by looking at the fitting profile, you can see that we've got a rather limited 2 high slots, 2 mid slots, 2 low slots, 2 combat rigs, and 2 engineering rigs. That doesn't give us much variety as to what we can actually fit onto this ship, but that makes sense. We're looking at a Tech IV frigate here. It's still more than a lot of other frigates equal to and below might have. I mean, we looked literally at the Tormentor yesterday that only has 2 highs and 3 lows. At least this gets mid slots and rigs. Anyway, I am hoping that eventually we do get the EWAR frigates as well. Obviously, that when there I mean like the Crucifier EWAR, the Griffin EWAR, the Vigil EWAR, and the Mulus EWAR. I think these were Tech 6 or Tech 7 originally, and they do still appear actually in combat anomalies. You'll see that you find Crucifiers in Tech 4 anomalies, and if you go up to a Tech 6 anomaly, you might get one that's referred to instead as a Crucifier EWAR, and that's kind of like the difference between an Executioner and an Executioner 2, so I'll be interested to see if those do get added back into the game. We saw those briefly in the open beta test and the final test before the game launched. I'm looking forward to those being re-added to the game as upgraded versions of these otherwise really cool frigates. Anyway, so with that fitting profile there, we've got a lot of limitations set on us. We don't get to equip a whole suite of different things, which means we need to specialise into roles, and that's fairly comfortable to do. With a power grid output here of 50 megawatts as well, that is massive as far as Tech IV and below frigates go. That, I think, is actually one of the biggest power grids on a frigate at this stage in the game. It means you can actually use this quite nicely for mining if you're too cheap to go and get yourself a proper venture. Also, with a cargo hold capacity of 530 cubic meters, that is a big cargo hold. Now, we've talked about this before in regards to other ships as well, how obviously a combat ship's cargo hold doesn't necessarily mean much, but here with the Crucifier, this means you can be running lots of encounters and you're not going to need to stop anytime soon. You can quite comfortably carry on all of those things that you need to, things like your, all the different loot and that you pick up. You can also do a lot of those transport encounters, the ones where you have to pick up 7 marines and drop them off at a different station, or crates of water, or vials of vaccine, that kind of thing. You can be doing those whilst running various combat encounters, which means that the Crucifier is actually really useful for encounter running, and you can make a lot of ISK per hour by jumping through and doing those deliveries en route to the different combat missions that you're going to be doing. Also, as I said, these ships are criminally underused, which means they are dirt cheap on the market, and most of the fittings are pretty cheap too, and the fact that you don't need many of them to actually get this thing working. You've got a very cheap combat ship that can run plenty of the combat encounters and the transport encounters at the same time. Defensively speaking, 1,336, again, it's more on the fragile end of things. It is a small frigate. I mean, when I say small, we're talking actually one of the larger frigates out there, 117 metre long hull and 66 metres of beam, but it is still a very small frigate, which means it can be one-shot by some of the bigger ships out there if they manage to get a clear shot. Being an Amar ship, most of that HP is in the armour, 424, with 346 in structure and 288 on shields. Now, you will see that even though it is heavy on the armour there and it's an Amar ship, this is still going to be shield tanked. Ultimately, there are almost no frigates in the game that I do believe should be armour tanked. Shield tanking on frigates just works so much better because you rarely need to actually activate any of your shield boosters or armor repairers anyway, and if a shield tank fails, you've still got time to get out. If an armor tank fails, you've got a tiny amount of structure before your ship is popped and you've lost it, so I'd rather keep that shield topped up. It's also nice and easy as well with things like if you've got a few more low slots, like 3 or more, and you can start putting resistances on there, you get a lot more solid. Here though, for the Crucifier, you could theoretically armor tank it. I am going to be shield tanking it, as you'll see later. Our capacitor bank here is pretty large, 484 gigajoules, middling to aggressive maximum capacitor recharge rate of 6.54 gigajoules per second. That means we can get this to capacitor stable quite quickly, even though it's an Amar ship and going to be using lasers, and obviously lasers use up a lot of capacitor per activation. Its signature radius of 32.3 is on the larger end of frigates, but it's still very much on the small end of things, which means it is a very hard ship to hit, especially since it has an astonishing flight velocity of 426 meters per second. That is a lot faster than I think a lot of people give Amar ships credit for being. This is a swift little ship with a very small signature radius that makes it hard to hit, and that's before we look at the trait description and roll bonuses, which have ways to make it even more difficult to hit. Its scan resolution of 459mm as well helps us lock onto things nice and quickly, gives us an advantage in combat. We can lock onto a target faster than they can lock onto us, we can start applying damage sooner. The mass is also nice and low, with a fairly large inertia modifier. However, that inertia modifier can cause problems if you're trying to maintain a very tight orbit or make a quick acceleration for getaway. That is definitely a problem as well, especially if you wanted to try and fit like an oversized afterburner or something onto this ship. That is going to cause you massive issues, and thus I wouldn't recommend it. Finally though, a warp speed of 5.5 astronomical units per second is on the fastest end of frigates. Again, excellent for encounter running. Now, if we move here into the trait descriptions, you'll see that the Crucifier is, as an E-War ship, getting bonuses from Signal Disruption and Advanced Frigate Command. Now, of course, if you've been watching the Frigate Pilot's Manifesto, you should know that Frigate Command is absolutely the skill you should be training up first. And here, even at Tech Level 4, we're starting to get Advanced Frigate Command as a necessary skill. That's what's going to give the Crucifier its damage bonuses. Each level in Advanced Frigate Command is giving us an 8% increase to small laser damage, that's obviously 40% at full training, and a 5% increase to small laser optimal range, which just helps you keep a bit of distance, and with that very high inertia modifier, allows you to maintain a comfortable orbit that you can actually keep a good speed at and still have your weapons as close to or even within optimal range. Finally then, Signal Disruption, as I said, this here is for tracking disruptors. We're getting a bonus to tracking disruptor strength, 5% per level. That's 25% in total, which means if something would normally give, say, a 20% disruption on tracking disruptor, it's actually going to count as 25 when fitted to a Crucifier. Doesn't sound like much, but trust me, that makes all the difference. Tracking disruptors are, of course, those mid-slot sensor disruptors, signal disruption modules that you use to mess with enemy turret systems. They reduce the optimal range and the accuracy fall-off of enemy turrets, which of course means that you are probably going from optimal range into accuracy fall-off now, and thus getting less damage and less chance of being hit, and it messes with the tracking speed. And again, a slower tracking speed means it is harder for you to be hit. You're already a small, fast-moving ship. If you hit your target with a powerful tracking disruptor, it's going to be even more difficult for them to actually apply damage against you, and that's where the Crucifier really comes into its own. With such a limited number of slots, we may not have much space to put a lot of varied stuff here on the Crucifier, but we can go heavy into specialization with it. Now, the fit that I've got here is one that I've been using quite a bit for flying this around for the funsies, and it's dead easy just to swap this quite comfortably into a very effective PvP fit. Also, the rigs, as you'll see, are dirt cheap too. This is a very cheap ship, very cheap fitting, excellent for PvE, anything up to tech level 7, and in PvP it becomes a terrifying little threat on its own. Now, for the high slots, I've gone for Rebel small pulse lasers. Obviously, the fact that they're Rebel doesn't really matter if all you have is Mark 5, Mark 7, or even just the standard, like, I think they're Joust or Longbow small pulse lasers. That will do quite nicely. Thanks to the bonuses from the Crucifier, they get an increase to their optimal range. 7.61 kilometers is what I've got here, and it's worth pointing out this is actually on the live server, not on Fulmination, so I am running with my own laser skills here of, I think, small laser operation is up to Expert 3, and upgrade is up to Advanced 4. No, I lie. Upgrade is up to Advanced 5 because I had that for the Succubus all the way up to there. Anyway, so 7.61 kilometers optimal range with an accuracy fall off of 3.05. That is a very short, sharp accuracy fall off from 7 kilometer optimal range. At 10 kilometer, you're 50% effective. At about 13 kilometer, you're not doing anything at all. So you really do need to hug that 7 to 8 kilometer margin there. That's where you're going to be orbiting. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the point in having tracking disruption if you're going for the long range, the short range version of the modules? Well, ultimately, that's mainly because I'm going to be going for a Vryklarkus small energy Nosferatu. This allows me just to make sure that everything I'm doing on the ship is running at all times, because those tracking disruptors can get a little bit capacitor heavy. As you can see here, activation cost is 44.6 gigajoules every 10 seconds, and it does actually have quite a punch to it. But by even being in close range, obviously if I'm in close range I've got a high angular velocity against my target, and I'm dropping the tracking speed adjustment there 27.5%. I'm knocking almost a third off their tracking speed. So if they've got a tracking of 100, it's down to about 70%. It's a big drop there. In regards to tracking, which makes you a much harder to target to hit than you already are. You're already a very small ship, quite fast moving, high angular velocity, difficult to hit. You then mess with their turrets and make yourself even more difficult to hit. Yeah, of course, you can swap out the pulse lasers for beam lasers and orbit a little bit further away. That way you also get the bonus when the tracking disruptors hit of dropping the accuracy fall off and the optimal range. I don't know why it lists optimal range as range skill bonus. It is optimal range that's affecting their negative 27.5% optimal range and accuracy fall off. That means where you may be sitting at, say, a optimal ranging to your opponent's guns, now you're in accuracy fall off, or if you were a fair way into accuracy fall off, you're now a long way into accuracy fall off, and it all just helps mitigate the damage. This is exceptionally powerful in PvP roams. If you and a friend are going around with something like a Crucifier and another ship, you can be an absolute thorn in everyone's side. Like, if I've seen roams with things like a Crucifier and a crew war before, and if you have those two ships together, almost nothing survives that, because by time it's trying to, with the tracking disruptor on, they cannot hit the crew war, and the crew war then just survives long enough to flatten their capacitor outright. It is a horrific little build there. Now, in addition to that as well, if you do want to go PvP here, you can go solo PvP quite comfortably with the Crucifier. At this point, I would swap out the Vryklarka Small Energy Nosferatu for some kind of Warp Scrambler. You can go for a Warp Disruptor, but if you're going to be close enough to get the bonus from a Warp Scrambler, you may as well be using that. Not only is it going to switch off their Micro Warp Drive, obviously it has that higher amount of point as well. You know, you're going to be doing more Warp Destabilization with a Scrambler than you would with a Disruptor, so you can hold them into position quite comfortably with that. I've just gone for the Nosferatu here because I am going to be showcasing this in PvE in just a moment, and I tend to use the Nosferatu for PvE just to stay nice and comfortable. That's not to say you even really need it. As you'll see in the combat demonstration, my capacitor rarely, if ever, takes any form of hit, but it's just nice to have that stability there, especially if you're going up against other things. I mean, heck, if you're in a roam and someone else has a Scrambler or a Disruptor, you could easily swap that Nosferatu out for something like a Neutralizer as well, and just really lean into that. Or heck, even 2 tracking disruptors. Obviously there is a module stacking penalty, and for having 2 of them, it's not going to be 27.5 plus 27.5. It will actually work out, off the top of my head, about 27.5 plus 20, but that's still better than 1, and it means that even small ships are going to have one heck of a time trying to actually hit you with tracking, and you're just going to mess with people's ranges. It's great fun, and it is incredibly powerful. Now, because we are quite a small and fast-moving target, I'm going to lean into that bonus, and we're going to try and speed tank to the best of our ability. A Ranger Small Afterburner is the preferred way of doing that. Obviously, a Micro Warp Drive not only chews off the top 25% of your capacitor, it also makes your signature radius bigger, and quite frankly, you're going so fast with the Micro Warp Drive that the tracking of your own turrets can't keep up with how fast you're orbiting a target. Useful if you absolutely need to close the gap, but here for speed tanking, not at all worth it. So we stick with a small afterburner to allow us to speed tank, maintain a nice fast speed, and thus a high angular velocity whilst we're orbiting our target. Makes us hard to hit. Just in case we do get hit though, a Veteran Small Shield Booster. This of course just is there to repair any damage that we do take onto the shields, and you'll see that sometimes you do take a little bit. If there are too many targets for you to effectively hit with the tracking disruptor, or you've just made a mistake and you're coming in at a bit of an awkward angle, you can still get hit. It's worth having something that just helps you recover that damage. Now, you can see, as I said, this is a capacitor stable ship. It's comfortably capacitor stable. It's higher than 50% capacitor stability. Very, very nice there. Means we've got a good amount of survivability, and whilst we're out in an anomaly, if we're hit with an enemy elite with a neutralizer or something, we can survive that. And Nosferatus aren't a big problem either, and it just means we can leave that shield booster running actually without worrying about it for the most part. Now you may be thinking, why a shield booster and not armour? Ultimately, I've discussed this at length in other videos, but on frigates I very rarely put an armour repairer onto a frigate. Shields to me are just the better way to go, because you're just making sure that you're keeping your damage as far away from your tiny structure as possible. Beyond this as well, I know some people have taken, from my Dramiel video, have taken to fitting things like large group armor repairers, or large group shield boosters, sorry, to the mid slots. I just feel here the Crucifier only has 2 mid slots, and both of them are very useful in other ways. A group shield booster could go in there, and thus you use fuel rather than capacitor. But quite frankly, you've got enough capacity here comfortably to be able to use that shield booster without having to sacrifice a mid slot. You'll see also the DPS is not bad at all. 135.5 DPS. This is coming out of a Tech IV frigate using only Tech I rigs. Now here I have gone for 2 laser burst aerator 1s. Obviously if you want to lean into this a bit more, you could upgrade those to burst aerator 2s. If you just want to use the prototype versions, I was actually using the prototype versions until today when I was doing a cleanup going around all the different stations that I've docked at, and realised I had a couple of laser burst aerator 1s, and I've just literally fitted them on and upgraded from there. Two burst aerators is higher DPS than a burst aerator and a collision accelerator, but it does come at the expense that you are cycling faster and thus using more capacitor, so do be aware that that may destabilize your capacitor if you're not as highly skilled into things like frigate engineering as perhaps I am. I am frigate engineering expert 5, that was the first expert 5 skill I got, and it's very, very useful because it does actually affect destroyers slightly as well, which is pretty cool. Anyway, you could then therefore decide that you'd rather go for collision accelerators. Collision accelerators don't increase the DPS as much, but they do still increase your damage, and they don't therefore increase the amount of capacity you're using. You maintain capacitor stability whilst still getting the increase of damage from the collision accelerators. They are also dirt cheap on the market right now. On the other side of things then, I've gone for an auxiliary thruster prototype and a polycarbon engine housing prototype. Extra flight velocity, which helps us speed tank a bit better, and lower inertia modifier. As I said, the Crucifier does have a very large inertia modifier, which means it struggles to maintain a tight orbit. This allows me to drop that by 6%, which doesn't sound like much, but every little helps, you know? And again, I've gone for prototypes here, just because it's all you really need. You'll see I'm clearing Tech 6 anomalies with ease with this thing, using pretty much prototype rigs. It's not at all like, you know, necessarily to go up to like Tech 1, Tech 2, or even the Tech 3 rigs. I see people fit Tech 3 rigs on everything, and it's like, it amazes me how many Eve Echoes players will spend millions of ISK, multiple millions, into the billions of ISK, to get an extra 1 or 2% DPS or 1% speed or things like that. Quite frankly, the prototypes are more than powerful enough for our needs here, and of course you get those free from your daily login rewards. As stupid as it sounds as well, the auxiliary thrusters, the basic auxiliary thrusters, are still like 11 million on the market, which is insane for a Tech 1 rig. I mean, come on! Why? Why are they that expensive? I mean, even the don't get me started on Tech 3 rigs. Tier 3 rigs are entirely too expensive. We are all paying entirely too much money for those. We just need to stop giving the grifters the money. Anyway, that's another topic for another video, I feel. That gives us, as you can see here, nice fast navigation, naked navigation of 643.26 meters per second, if that's before we activate the afterburner, which more than doubles that. Obviously gives us a very nice speed there. Warp preparation time of 1.86 is under the magic, in inverted commas, 2 seconds. Everyone seems to think that being under 2 seconds makes you immune to being caught by non-interdictosphere gate camps. It's not strictly true. You can be caught faster than that. It depends on human error and server ticks, but 1.86 is a blasted fast time, means you can achieve warp very, very quickly, and it's nice with 5.5 AUs. Defense, as I said, is of course on the lighter end of things, thanks to the bonuses I have in things like ship engineering, frigate defense upgrade and that kind of thing. I do have this obviously a little bit higher than its naked stats otherwise would be, its standard stats, but it's still a very fragile ship, as you'll see in a moment, but the shield booster will keep us alive, as does the speed tank. Anyway, enough of showcasing and talking about this in fitting, let's actually jump into space and blow some stuff up. So I'm here now demonstrating this in a Tech 6 Minmatar news encounter mission. I can't remember for the life of me for which one it actually was at this point, but you can see I'm coming towards the end of Wave 2 now. Couldn't be bothered to showcase Wave 1 and Wave 2 because they're quite, you know, they're simple, small waves, and as you can see I've taken almost no damage to my shields and nothing to my capacitor. Wave 3 is a little bit bigger and we can showcase things a bit better. Now I've got a Hound and a Sniper. Those are small ships. Small ships have a good tracking, therefore they are more likely to be able to hit me. As I lock on and start to approach my orbit, you'll see that I lock onto the Hound, but I'm going to put the tracking disruptor here on the Talwar. That means the Talwar is going to struggle to hit me whilst I'm maintaining a tight orbit around the Hound. That means the Hound, ultimately I'm speed tanking the Hound, but I'm using the tracking disruptor to survive taking hits from the Talwar. That's not to say I'm not going to take hits. As you can see, I am taking a few hits here, incidental as well, from things like the Rupture, the Bellicose, the 2 Bellicose there as well. But a quick activation of the shield booster is all it takes to get rid of that, and that Hound is going down very, very quickly. Capacitor is still sitting up at 79%. Not a concern, not a worry there at all. That Hound should go down in the next cycle or two, hopefully. Is it going to go down? Nope, not quite. Next one. There we go. Now we can move on to the Talwar. Now, by moving on to the Tech IV EWAR, again, I'm going to hit orbit on that. By orbiting it, I'm maintaining the highest possible angular velocity I can against that particular target. Now, you see there's a moment there where I kind of come in a straight line away from the group. I do get hit by something. I think that is one of the cruisers does hit me a bit there, glances off my shields. Again, one cycle of the shield booster is all that takes to patch that up, and I'm still sitting above 63% capacitor, 67%, 68%, 69%, thanks to the Nosferatu draining, and that's with the tracking disruptor active as well, and you'll see that that takes a good 5 to 6% off each activation on its own. It's quite capacitor hungry, but more than enough. You know, it's more. Our capacitor is more than capable of handling that. Now, I've spotted here as well that this bellicose here that you can see in the distance, that has been doing some shield boosting remote shield boosting onto the other ships. That appears to be a logistics ship. Obviously, the Minmatar logistics ship technically is the Scythe, but this bellicose seems to have been fitted with those modules. I'm thus ready to change my orbit and my target to that one next. There we go, because I want to take that out first. Now that I'm up to cruiser-sized targets, I would either want to go for the Rupture, which here you can see has a Nosferatu and a target painter on me, and crikey, can I just point out, look at the modules here in the bottom right. This is the lag that I sometimes get here in Zimbabwe. How long did that take from me tapping to actually activating? You see all those little alerts, everything's already active, and it's like, yeah, gee, thanks. Finally, we get active and back on to actually killing stuff, so I can deactivate things there. I'm full health, have obliterated through some capacitor there by leaving my shield running for several cycles. Game will have registered those cycles, just not displayed them to me, which is great fun. But hey, 50% capacitor, still quite comfortable with that. I don't need the tracking disruptor anymore either. I'm now orbiting 3 cruisers. And that tracking disruptor, as you can see, isn't really necessary at this point, although actually it is still on. The Gistum Bellicose, if you have a look under there, you can see the tracking disruptor is still applied, and the game is just not letting me switch it off, thanks to that wonderful patch of lag. Now, it is eating my capacitor a little bit. Obviously, we're still capacitor stable at just around 50%, but it would be nice if I could switch that off, because I don't need it, and I'd rather have a high capacitor, you know, just in case anything were to happen. But hey, there we go. What I was saying a second ago as well, normally I go for frigates then destroyers, because obviously frigates and destroyers are the two things that are going to be able to hit my ship most as a small target themselves. Obviously small cannons, small lasers, small railguns, etc. have the highest tracking of different turrets. They are therefore capable of actually hitting me despite my speed tank, and you can see how quick that speed tank actually is there as I whiz across the background of the bellicose. Once I get to things like the cruisers, obviously I have a choice of which one I go for from there. Now, the Rupture has some EWAR modules and is hitting me with a target painter. Target painter obviously increases my signature radius. Larger signature radius means I'm easier to hit. I would normally want to take that Rupture out first, as it is negatively impacting my ability to speed tank. But, as you can see, even being hit by the Rupture, I am taking no damage whatsoever, partially thanks to the tracking disruptor as well. Fingers crossed now that that's dead there, that bug will lose itself. Yes, there we are, the tracking disruptor is actually cycling, so I can switch it off. Now, the reason I went for that bellicose is because it was doing remote shield boosting. Remote shield boosting obviously is healing up other ships, and the last thing I want to be trying to do is trying to kill a Rupture whilst that bellicose is also trying to keep it alive. Every shot of damage I do, I'm ultimately fighting against those remote shield boosters. Anyway, as you can see, we are coming now towards the end of this wave. That bellicose has gone down, and we're now onto the Rupture. I'll then move on to the second bellicose after that. And I'm not going to sit here and showcase this entire thing, because it does take a little bit of time. 130 DPS for a frigate is not bad, especially for a tier 4 frigate. But obviously, there are ships out there that have a lot higher DPS. Again, I don't claim that, you know, oh, if you're a frigate pilot, you're going to be able to clear anomalies faster than anyone else. You can't. Other ships have higher DPS and are thus capable of clearing anomalies faster. They also cost more, they require more skill points to fly, and if you lose one, it takes an awful lot more. I would rather lose a Dramiel than I would a Cinnabal. Just look at the price tag between those two. Or same once you hit Tech level 6. I would rather lose something like one of the Tech 6 frigates or destroyers, I'm trying to think what those even are, compared to something like a Caracal or an Omen or an Omen Navy issue. Caracal Navy issue compared to, you know, just a Tech 6 destroyer. It's a big price difference, and there's a reason that I fly these small ships. Anyway, I think that does demonstrate quite nicely that we are capable of doing Tech 6 anomalies here quite easily, no stress at all, and fairly quickly as well. This entire thing, obviously I go back and record this voiceover over the footage after the fact. This entire anomaly I think took about 23 minutes. 23 minutes for a Tech 6 anomaly in a Tech 4 ship that costs basically less than, I think this is less than 5 million in total. It cost me to fit this entire thing, not including upgrading to the Tech 1 laser burst aerators, because those were just sitting around at another station. The other fittings I think were less than 5 million worth in stuff there. And that begs the question then, since yesterday I showcased the Tormentor and said that basically that can do Tech 7 anomalies for less than 2 million, why on earth would you use a ship that requires sort of, you know, well, more than double that amount of ISK? This one cost me 5 million, the Tormentor only cost me 2 million, why would you use this over the Tormentor? And that's a darn good question, because honestly, yeah, I could be doing this anomaly right now with the Tormentor and it has a similar clear time. The reason you may want to start flying things like Crucifier or the Griffin or the Maulus or the Vigil is because of their E-War potential in PvP. Obviously the Tormentor has no mid-slots whatsoever. It cannot even lock a target down in PvP, meaning you need friends to come along with Warp Scramblers, Warp Disruptors, etc. just to actually hold that target in place for you. The Crucifier here can hold that target in place, can screw with its weapon systems long enough to survive its damage, and then rip it apart quite comfortably from there. Therefore the Tormentor is a lot cheaper, yes, and still has a good PvE clear time, but the Crucifier here is an absolute death threat in PvP. Seriously, I wish I could have got PvP footage for this one. I flew around for 3 hours this evening trying to find PvP and found literally nothing other than high level stuff, and I'm not going to throw a Crucifier up against something like a Vigilant, which was one of the things I came up against in Geminate. That's just not happening. That is a fight that I cannot possibly win, so there's no point even trying. 3 hours of no luck finding a target means sadly there is no PvP section in this video, and it's something I really hope the developers address soon. I want them to actually bring back solo PvP. I know we're getting the arena in sort of August 2021, but that's still multiple months away. That's what, 6 months away from here now still? 6-7 months? It's a long time away, and you know, I really want some solo PvP now. The alternatives I can think of are increasing the amount of ISK that you earn from anomalies rather than encounters, or putting special things into anomalies rather than encounters, because obviously you can jump into an anomaly and find someone. You cannot jump into an encounter. So why should encounters be more lucrative? Why should they give you more money than the riskier version of combat? But hey, I've ranted about this in other videos and I'm not going to continue that rant here too much. Ultimately, I really hope the developers do something soon to bring solo PvP back, because I miss showcasing it in videos. Every time one of you folks mentions in the comments, please showcase more PvP, trust me, I am trying. And there's the end of the combat encounter. Huzzah. That's all done quite nicely, and I said about 23-24 minutes with a Tech 4 EWAR frigate in the Crucifier. I'm hoping the developers will bring back that PvP. Every time you folks ask, you know, please showcase PvP more in videos, trust me, I'm trying. I wish I could showcase it more. PvP, solo PvP is what I enjoy most in EVE Echoes. Whether I win it or I lose it, you guys have seen me laugh my ass off as I lose a worm and a succubus and things like that on camera. I find it hilarious to lose ships in funny ways like that, and I'm just disappointed I can't do it as often as I'd like. Anyway folks, that does bring us now towards the end of this video. As I said, this is the first of the Tech 4 EWAR ships that I wanted to cover. I will also be looking at things like the Vigil, the Maulus and the Griffin in due time, just to talk about those. As a quick point here, just what I'm talking about on screen, I know a lot of folks have had that whole thing with the chat bug. Recently the help chat has been turned on for everyone. It is an absolute spam fest. I wish I could be in the help chat a bit more because I like helping people, but if you are struggling with that massive spam here, as I say, tap open the chat panel as you see on the left hand side here, you tap on help at the top left to go into the help channel, you then tap help at the very top, and there is a leave channel option. Anyway, the footage is now recycling back to the beginning of this anomaly, so that signifies that I've been talking entirely too long, and it is time for me to end this video and leave you guys to the rest of your day. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Are you flying a Crucifier? I love this ship to pieces, and I really want to hear more people flying these EWAR ships. Hopefully by showcasing these in some videos now, we can actually showcase this a bit more, and you can see a bit more of how these ships work and why you might want to fly them. Otherwise, folks, happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!